Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, and welcome to the podcast, The Devil and the Deep Blue Me, and I am your host, Rich Bruck. And once again, I am so glad that you're here. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I'm glad you could come by this week. Last week, we talked about choosing your battles and your people. And really, this week's topic, well, it flows right out of that, because once you start getting clearer about who you want to be around and what you're willing to fight for, well, you quickly run into this next big hurdle, which is learning to disappoint people, which, let me tell you, is an art form I really wish I had mastered a long time ago. Okay, so confession time. Just yesterday, I got an email asking me to do something that, honestly, it sounded like a logistical nightmare in my life. It involved a lot of moving parts and weird time commitment that I just, it wasn't in my lane right now. My immediate gut level reaction was, well, how can I make this work? What can I juggle? And how can I say yes without completely derailing my week and my life? It's like this automatic software that runs in my brain, kicking in before I even consciously even think about it. The people pleaser subroutine it's still active even after all these years. But then, almost immediately after that, I must add, another part of my brain, it chimed in. The part that's been accumulating experience, the part that has lived through enough yeses and turned into, oh God, whys. And for once, that second voice, it was louder. And it said, Rich, just say no. Nicely, but firmly, just say no. So I did. I drafted a polite email explaining that, I just couldn't make it work. And then I hit send. And for about 5 minutes, there was that familiar little pang of guilt. Did I let them down? Will they be mad? Will they think I'm unreliable? That old tape that still keeps trying to play over and over again. But then the really liberating part happened. Nothing. No anger follow-up. Just a polite, okay, thanks for letting me know type of thing. And within minutes, the pang was gone, replaced by this quiet sense of relief and, honestly, a bit of pride. That, my friends, is what I mean by the art of disappointing people. It's not about being mean or selfish. It's about getting very good at saying no when you need to and realizing that the world doesn't actually end when you do. The phrase, you can't please everyone, it's a cliche for a reason. We all know it, but actually living it, that's a whole different ballgame. For so much of my life, my operating system was set to maximize approval. I genuinely believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I just said yes enough, if I anticipated everyone's needs, I could somehow just make everybody happy. And if they weren't happy, it was obviously my fault. I think this might go back. I'm not sure, but I think this might go back to my younger days in music, actually. You're constantly trying to impress, to get noticed, to fit in. You're playing gigs you don't really want to play. You're agreeing to collaborate that, really just doesn't feel right. You're stretching yourself thin because you don't want to, burn a bridge, or worse, be seen as difficult or egotistic. I remember one period where I was literally playing in 3 different bands, teaching lessons, and the one time in my life working a day job, and I was consistently exhausted. I was always feeling like I was letting somebody down because I couldn't be everywhere at once or doing everything perfectly. The irony was, in trying to please everyone, I ended up pleasing nobody. and I did that very well. And I certainly wasn't pleasing myself. I guess the moment the tide really started to turn for me was, oddly enough, not a huge dramatic event, but more of a series of small ones. I remember a friend asking for a really big favor, something that would, take a significant chunk of my time and my resources. And deep down, I knew I didn't really want to do it, but every fiber of my being screamed, yes, at first, because that's what I did. But this time, something, it felt different. I was so burned out from the last round of yeses that the thought of saying no felt like an act of self-preservation. So with my heart pounding, I actually said, well, I appreciate you asking, but I just can't do that right now. Just those words. And you know what? The world didn't end. They were a little disappointed, of course. I could tell. But they said, okay, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. And that was that. No argument, no guilt trip, no drama. That single interaction, as small as it was a revelation. It was the first crack in the foundation of my people-pleasing philosophy. It was the first time I realized that setting a boundary wasn't an act of aggression. It was actually an act of clarity. So, what I wish I'd known then was that guilt is often a learned response, not an accurate gauge of your wrongdoing. We're conditioned to feel guilty for saying no, especially women, actually, but honestly, it cuts across the males too. We confuse disappointing someone with hurting someone. And while, sometimes they do overlap, more often than not, they don't. Disappointment it's a natural part of life. People disappoint us all the time. It's part of human interaction. And you, as a living, breathing human with your own needs and limits, you are allowed to be one of those people. I guess the other thing I wish I knew is that your true people, your real tribe, they will respect your boundaries. The people who throw a tantrum or try to guilt trip you, or who consistently make you feel bad for prioritizing yourself, those are often the people you learn to gently phase out, as we talked about last week. The art isn't about making people disappointed. It's about making peace with the fact that sometimes your yes to yourself is a no to someone else. And that's not just acceptable, it's necessary for your own well-being. It's not about being a jerk, it's about being authentic. It's about not over-promising and under-delivering out of fear of saying no. It's about giving yourself permission to have needs and limits. And honestly, it feels pretty damn good when you get there. All right, so time for our little weekly brain detour. So on this week's segment of enrichment, and speaking of things that disappoint or maybe delight, depending on your perspective, of course, did you know that a group of owls is called a parliament? I mean, that sounds like a group of people who are constantly trying to disappoint each other, so it feels strangely relevant, I guess. The highest mountain on Earth isn't Mount Everest, it's actually Mauna Kea in Hawaii. If you measure from its base on the ocean floor to its peak, most of it is underwater, so it often disappoints people who expect a towering landmass, but it is actually the highest mountain. And bananas are berries, but strawberries, well, they aren't. Yeah, Go ahead and rethink your entire fruit classification system now. Talk about a disappointing reveal for strawberry lovers. The word robot comes from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labor or drudgery. So essentially robots were invented to do the things that, we just don't want to do, thereby preventing us from disappointing someone by saying no to an unpleasant task. And maybe that's the real art of disappointing people right there. So there you have it. Facts that might either disappoint your preconceived notions or just make you scratch your head. Either way, maybe you'll learn something. Okay, and finally here, a little music check-in. This week, I've been working on a piece that's really stripped back. It's just acoustic guitar and a simple vocal melody. And there's a line in it that goes something like, how does it go? The quiet where the answer lives is not the noise you're giving. How do you like that? Anyway, it's still very much a work in progress, but it kind of captures that feeling of finding peace when you stop trying to accommodate every expectation. Yeah. Anyway, it feels good to just let it be simple. Not trying to be a big production, not trying to impress anyone. Just letting the song be what it needs to be. And speaking of things I'm working on, you can always check out more of my music and other music I've done in the past on any of your favorite streaming platforms. And again, hopefully you find something that you like. So, the art of disappointing people. It's less about making people unhappy and more about allowing yourself to be honest about your limits and your needs and your capacity. It's a muscle you have to build, and it feels awkward at first, but man, the freedom on the other side, well, it's absolutely worth it. All right. That is it for episode 5. And thank you again so much for joining me today. And once again, your messages, your support, they are splendid. So please keep them coming. And you can reach me at The Devil in the Deep Blue Me on most of your streaming platforms. Anywhere you want to reach out and say hi or let me know what you're thinking, that would be great. And we will be back next week to talk about another inevitable part of life, when friends become strangers. So get ready for that one. It's a poignant reflection on evolving relationships. So until then, try disappointing someone gently this week and see what happens. You might surprise yourself. But until then, have yourself a safe and happy week.